in my experience, the rain in Spain falls mainly on the tourist.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast loosely based on writers sitting around, not traveling or getting rained on, drinking coffee or wine, talking about writing, publishing, the whole creative process. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Your hosts today are Chaz and Karen Brenchley, David Welsh, and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 32, Deadlines Go Woosh. Kind of thought this would be a great way to talk about how to get things done and when to get things done. And what do you do differently if you have a deadline versus I really just want to write the thing?
Point of order, you really should explain why you titled the episode like you did.
Well, I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they go by.
Yes,
Said
Douglas Adams.
Douglas Adams, indeed.
A great man, and much missed still.
Yes.
Well, I never shot at him.
You would have hit him, I'm sure.
He was very large. He was eminently hittable.
So, as for deadlines, okay,
Yes.
So far, all I have ever sold to are anthologies, which have editors and deadlines. And they have deadlines. And so, I'm a programmer by, in the real world, because I haven't sold that many stories. And so, I'm used to deadlines that way. But words, creative stuff is slightly different. So, I have tools. Okay, and various tools. There was a thing. One of the man who runs Chaz's website had a wonderful way of. He had an image. Okay, and it was if it was 100,000 words, the image would be a certain number of pixels long, and as you progressed along, you would get more and more of the picture. Mm-hmm. And Chaz would post this, and we would see how far he was and by how much of the picture. So that was one very visual, nice way of doing it.
It was lovely. I mean, I've had numerous tools and numerous methods and numerous systems. I mean, I've been writing to deadline for 40-something years, and I've been missing deadlines for 39-something years. Though actually, no, my first real deadline was my first novel. They gave me a month to write it, and I was so panicked. I'd never finished a book, and I was so panicked that I wrote it in 3 weeks. So for a while there, I was always on time. I never missed a deadline. Mm-hmm. That didn't last very long.
Well, what was your first missed deadline then?
My first missed deadline. It's like your first overdraft. You panic, and then discover that it doesn't really matter that much because big publishers are kind of used to this and they build time in, so you can make it up later. But the first bad one. Actually, it may have been my first serious missed deadline, was when I was commissioned to write my 5th novel, and I got halfway through and I got totally stuck. Because books 1 to 3, I had written 2 synopses. Publishers like synopses.
I hate writing synopses.
Oh, hell, everybody hates writing synopses, but publishers liked them and would only commission a book at that stage with a synopsis in front of them. And for the first 3, I followed my synopsis religiously. Then for book 4, it wasn't synopsizable. It was just there will be a shopping mall, a gunman will turn up and kill some people, and we'll see what happens.
I can see the problem because that doesn't really narrow it down.
It really doesn't.
No.
Sure, I'd say, well...
No, but
stop watching late night TV.
Yeah, but by that time, they published 3 of my books already. They kind of trusted me. Uh-huh. So they were happy to go ahead on that basis. And
Little did they know.
But that book, again, because I had a deadline, I didn't have a plot. I was a bit panicked about it. But this was a whole new way of working, where I just sort of sat down and started writing and da-da-da. It panicked me, it worried me, it made me angsty all year, but I thought it made a better book. So the following book, I thought I would go into it the same way. Trouble is that the mall time was a fairly simple construction. Everything happened in 24 hours. It followed the Greek unities: unity of place, unity of time, and the other one. Unity of action, of course. And Paradise, which was the next book, was completely opposite to that. It had multiple characters and multiple interweaving storylines and was really complex. And I tried to do it without a synopsis, just going ahead and writing. Mm-hmm. And I got halfway in the year that they had allowed me. After when my deadline ran out, I was halfway in and completely stuck and panicking like Billy O.
I think you should back up a second. You introduced an idea that we've not talked about on this thing before. Yeah. Let's talk about the unities. The Greek concept, unity of action, unity of...
Yeah, that's all I know. When I was at school, I think it was an English lesson that my headmaster took for some reason. And he explained that Greek drama was built around these three notions. Unity of time, it all happens consecutively and within a short span of time. Mm-hmm. Unity of place, it all happens in the same place more or less. And unity of action, there aren't subplots, there aren't interweavings, it's all, this is what you get.
This is the Platonic ideal of a story.
I think it sounds Aristotelian, really, if anything.
Explain yourself.
Yeah.
Well, Aristotle was the one, order and naming. So maybe they might have started out, but it sounds very Aristotelian to say unity of action, unity of place, unity of time. So that would also explain why episodes of 24 are the perfect little Greek drama.
Yes.
As it were.
Yes.
It's within one day. Everything is going to happen within one day.
Yes. I think you just follow the one character.
And it's one character.
Yeah.
And all of us agree that we don't even want to know him. That's not a friend because you know.
That's like
Jack, right? That's his name, Jack something.
Jack Bauer, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I also subscribe to their 9 and 50 ways to compose a tribal lay, and every single one of them is right.
9 and 60, I think.
9 and 60. Well, fine. 9 and 60. Mine have 9 and 50, and it's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Keep going.
Well, that's Kipling.
It's Kipling, yes.
And yet there are interesting books that manage things like Cloud Atlas that has not unity of time.
No, Cloud Atlas does not meet any of those requirements.
Right.
Jerks.
So the Greek ideal then is not the only way to do this.
That is exactly what we're saying.
Right.
But then that is exactly what this whole podcast is saying on every episode. What works for you is what works.
Well, right. Yeah. And you're always the one to be the counterexample and say that's
my job.
Yep.
Well, the thing is, I think what Chaz is saying is important, though, because...
Did I say something important?
Yes, you did. Well, you're talking about... ironically, Maltime is one of the, 2 of your books that I haven't read. But, I know. But the difference between writing everything in one place with, even one main character versus I have read Paradise, and you're right, it is twisty and windy, and I would think that it's kind of like, again, I'm a programmer. There's, different types of programs you write, and there's different ways of how I set up my schedule. And if you're doing it with other people, that's a whole nother question.
Yes.
If you're doing it with other people, there's different ways of managing it. And so I think that, I think that's something to keep in mind. If you're writing a story for an anthology, if you're writing a novel for a publisher, if you're trying to get all your stories together for a collection, for example.
Was that a hint? I'm working on it. I've got one story to go.
Yay!
Yeah. But anyway, there are different ways of approaching each of these things.
Totally.
And then again, within a novel, which is much bigger, there's a whole bunch of different ways of slicing that.
This is more or less what I'm saying, I think, is that, every novel is different. It's not just every writer has a different approach. I have a different approach for every novel. This isn't deliberate.
It's what makes them novel.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's just the way it works. I have one book out there, Desdemona, which I wrote as a race with a friend. Because he was starting a novel, I was starting a novel. We were both... neither of them was commissioned, so we were just doing this not exactly for fun because we were hoping to sell them later, but we were doing it sort of privately and off our own bats. And we were both on LiveJournal talking about this, and I do not remember which of us said, let us race. The first person to the end of the book wins the race. And so we raced. And I would like to point out that in every week, we checked in with each other once a week. Well, we checked in publicly once a week. And every week I had written more words than he had.
Yeah.
He technically won the race by finishing his book first.
But it was a shorter book.
But it was a shorter book. Mine was significantly longer, and I sold mine first.
I see. How long did it take? How long did this race?
About 12 weeks is the way I remember
Really?
it. Yeah.
Because you just admitted to writing a novel in 3 weeks. I mean...
The first book I ever wrote, but that was written to a synopsis that the publishers gave me. I didn't even have to come up with the idea.
Yeah.
All I had to do was find the words, and they were not very... I mean, it was 52,000 words or something. It was ridiculously short for a novel. But then, yeah, I mean, contrary-wise, Paradise was 250,000 words, and it took me 2 years to write.
I just wanted... can I take one moment in there before you go too far and shout out for the 50,000 words does count as a novel for NaNoWriMo. For those of you who do it, I want you to feel good for you. That's totally a novel. That bad man didn't really mean it, except for he did, but only for himself. Now go on.
Okay, look, I can talk about the proper length of novels, and I can talk about NaNoWriMo, though I've never done it. It astonishes me that people can plunge in and reckon that they can write 50,000 words in.
And go then. That's what I just wanted to say.
Yeah, no, it's
go,
fabulous.
all of you who've done it.
Yeah, as I say, I've done it once in 3 weeks when I was young and knew nothing. The more I've learned about this whole novel writing thing, the slower I am and the longer it takes me.
But how long is a novel? Okay.
Yeah, how long is a novel? See, the problem is we are bound by certain old conventions. Specifically, I can talk about the science fiction and fantasy world, but because we've had awards since the days when novels were short, so the novel category for both the Hugo and the Nebula, which are the two major international science fiction awards, anything over 40,000 words counts as a novel, which for the last 40 years has been ridiculous because no book could be commercially published as a novel at 40,000 words. It's just not viable.
So what are the levels below that?
Okay, short story goes up to 7,500 or 8,000 words. I can't remember exactly. Okay. And then it's a novelette up to 15 or 17.5, something like that. And then it's a novella up to 40, and anything over 40 counts as a novel. The odd thing is that actually we're coming back towards that again in some ways because electronic publishing has made the publication of short novels viable again.
Yeah.
So there is, I think, since the 80s, novels have been growing fat.
Yes. And then they've been like spawning off into trilogies and quadrilogies and quintrilogies,
that's a whole other thing, really.
But there were times in the 80s and the 90s. I met Tad Williams.
Yes.
Okay. He was walking across my front lawn because I was holding a going away party for Kate Elliott, and he announced that I had just finished a Green Angel Tower and it's 1,500 pages in manuscript.
Yes.
And that's huge.
Yes.
And to date, that is the longest book ever turned into doc.
Yeah. But do you know what year this was?
It was sometime in the 90s.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely the thing. Books got longer through the 80s, especially in fantasy.
I was going to say sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah.
There is so much world building. I mean, consider Dune, consider Duran, consider, some of these. They take more, so it seems like the reader of the sci-fi and fantasy is willing to spend the time to really immerse themselves in.
Yeah, immersion is because it's one of the things about reading science fiction and fantasy, but particularly fantasy, is that because you're going into a world which is completely separate from your own. Immersion is what the reading process gives you.
Yeah.
It's what it's all about. It's what you're there for. And long books help.
Right. And conversely, or symbiotically, or however you want to put it,
yes.
It's not worth your while as a writer to do all this world building and then write a 50,000 word novel and call it good.
Yeah, we do have kind of a tradition of having done that, though. I spent 2 weeks researching Elizabethan printing methods in order to write a short story, which was probably the most research versus writing time I've ever put in.
Well, what was the name of the story?
Master Eld His Ways Goose.
Yeah, I love that title.
It's a lovely title. And if you don't know what a ways goose is, go and research Elizabethan printing.
Now, you can say romance novels, I know, actually run between 50 and 100. Because there's like the silhouette romances novels, or, there's a whole bunch of small ones, Black Lace, which run on the smaller side. But you can get the bigger, because if you start adding things like historical romance, like Outlander, they get longer. But again, it takes more to really set the stage.
When I was a baby writer, I wrote teenage romance. If you were a romance writer of any description, one of the goals was Mills and Boon, which I think is Harlequin over here, or was Harlequin over here.
Yeah, Harlequin is. Yeah.
And those were 42,000 words, and written within a very strict guidelines, and published.
Perhaps even a formula.
Perhaps even, we might say, a formula, Dave. Yes, and published on a monthly cycle, and there was massive amounts of money to be made. Because romance readers read a lot of books, and these were sold cheaply and in drugstores.
Right.
Once upon a time, did you ever hear about Torrid Romance?
No.
.com. There used to be a site when my friend got married, and you could go onto their website and you say, this is the bride's name, this is the groom's name. You gave a physical description. You said, did you want cowboy or medieval or any of this? And what they basically did was plugged it straight into their manuscript formula, and you got a customized bride and groom romance novel, which, as the best maid, I presented to the bride on the. It was fantastic.
Did you read it?
It was terrible, but it was perfectly delightful in its own way.
So did every customer get the same text just with their names in, or were they actually tailored?
Was it actually generated by a computer, or did they farm it out to some writer and pay them?
No, it was mostly the same, but they had a human being went in and filled a few things, like section A, fill in her long, flowing blonde hair, or her short curly, mop of gray and white, whatever.
Certainly, gray and white would have been a very popular choice.
If you, although you could do what we did, for our wedding, Liz Williams, who is a very good science fiction fantasy writer who wrote a series of paranormal mysteries about with Detective Chen. She wrote a short story starring Karen and Chaz Brinchley as characters, and wrote it for us, and actually bound it for us.
It's lovely.
So there's a print run of one.
Yes.
And
so suck up to your friends. Oh no, there's ways. There's ways.
Yeah, we didn't know she was going to do that.
Well,
now you can.
Did you?
It's like
the truth is out.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's all these bespoke T-shirt and mug printing companies out there. This is just kind of along the same lines.
It's an elaboration. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's not. I mean, it's not even that new. Andrew J. Offutt, the science fiction writer
who wrote
Porn. Towards the end of his career, he was writing porn to commission, and I think this is exactly how it works. They told him what they wanted, and that's what he wrote.
Here's where I think we could have a fun one. I think we should go into the business because crime mystery thrillers can go shorter. They basically are the ones that seem to be 70 to 90,000. Yep. So imagine it's going to be your friend has just gone through a breakup / loss. I'm just saying, how brilliant would it be to write a custom book for somebody that had them solve the mystery of what happened to all those terrible exes?
That's brilliant.
Isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, I think it could be a beautiful way to say, she herself had been a widow since, checkbook here, Eric had passed away, and her girlfriend Jolene had left her, so leaving her bereft instead of a fine unit of 3, she was on her lonesome for the first time in years. Well, what is she to do in her small town of Rio del California but solve crime, for instance?
I think you've got something, okay? And, I think
I hope it's not contagious.
You and Carolyn Keene can, get together and start churning these out.
Because even now I can feel our inbox filling up with people saying, quick, write me a story in which I get to murder Joan.
Oh, well, I feel it strongly. I mean, my Bluebirds, which I hope someday somebody wants to publish, is chock full of exes and or people who wouldn't sleep with me, and I kill them all off gleefully. It's glorious.
Right. Yes. The tradition in science fiction and fantasy is that you kill off your friends.
Yes.
I myself have been murdered in more than one book.
I love you enough to kill you, Chess.
I know you do.
Well, and also,
I turned you into a kid, though, in the last one, though, so we'll see.
Well, there's also the tradition of if you've got a starship or something like that, to Tuckerize like mad because you've got to come up with ensign so-and-so, and it's where else are you going to get the names?
We did that for the Young Explorers Guide.
Tell us about the Young Explorers Guide.
Well, the Young Explorers Guide, representing, I was in 4 of them starting 2015, but it was made for middle grade readers.
Right.
And it was raised for people that were, they said in particular they wanted let's just say non-white boy heroes. So a lot of female characters, non-white, disabled. Sure. There's a lot of non-traditional science fiction story out there. And I made the first 2 because I wrote my stories by December, right on time. And then
deadlines, you see.
Corey and Sean, wonderful people out there running
right back around.
And then it was right about July when I wrote in that for the next book because I hadn't heard anything. Well, I'm like, so is the next deadline in December again? Should I? And they're like, oh no, we had a problem. We did it in June.
Yeah.
That's why there's a year and I don't have a story in it.
Oh.
But other than that, we did a little Tuckerization in that for extra money during the Kickstarter. And so there's a couple characters of mine that were named by somebody that kicked in a little bit of extra money. And in return, we sent their libraries copies too. So that I think middle school libraries should have representational books for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you subscribe to my Patreon at a certain generous dollar level, you get to name a Crater School girl. So there can be a girl in an English boarding school on Mars.
Can you decide that she dies horribly?
You get to.
We'll tell you the price.
I don't think you have a price.
I think there should be special rates for.
Yeah, certainly. I at the moment for $10
for special services, contact the author.
at the $10 subscription level, I'm happy for people to tell me the characteristics of their chosen girl as well as her name. Except that everybody wants them to be bright and friendly.
Oh no, I know a sullen girl that's going to get killed off. It'll be beautiful. Yeah, I can see all those points, and that's a way that I've seen in a lot of Kickstarters, this whole Tuckerization. So for those of you that maybe seen it in passing and tried to back things, Tuckerized means you're in the story.
Yeah.
And or it's like naming an X a cockroach that they then feed at the zoo.
By name or
by name generally. Yes.
And so actually I was Tuckerized. I went over to Kate Elliott's house one night because we were in the same war unit in the SCA. That's how I know her. And I was complaining that I was never going to fall in love and get married. And so could she please write me in as a character who gets married? And so if you read the Duran novels, there is a character named Bronwyn Emrys, which is my SCA name. And that character is me. And I got to name my ship and I got to name all these things. And I had the best, hottest love affair with the guy. And I was supposed to get married in the next book. And that book never got, she didn't get the contract for it. So I had to wait. Decades.
But that's okay because you actually did get married.
I met Chaz and he was a writer, so everything's good.
I suppose that's do you parcel it out do you personally parcel it out? If you say to yourself, all right, I've got about 100,000 I want to do because my first 2 books were 100,000. Do you say to yourself, I need to write 2,000 words a day to stay on track for this deadline? Or?
Yeah. I've tried to manage books in a myriad different ways, and sometimes it works, and it's almost always different. But when I was young, when I was new to all of this, some of my friends used to work hours. Mostly they were the ones who had day jobs and were used to spending sort of 9 to 5 at work. And when writing became the work, they just spent 9 to 5 at their table writing. And I think I tried that for about 2 consecutive days, and it completely doesn't work for me. Yeah. But I can set myself targets and mostly reach them most days-ish, give or take.
Do you find that, I mean, you're talking about self-imposed deadlines.
Yes.
Do you find that self-imposed deadlines are harder to hit than quote-unquote real deadlines that a publisher sets?
They are infinitely more crumbleable.
Yes.
They do disintegrate.
Right. That's what I find.
Yes.
And very forgiving to me.
Yes. One has to be, because one lets oneself down so often.
Right. I would be a wreck otherwise.
Exactly. But the unfortunate thing was that I learned through writing Paradise and delivering it a year late.
Right.
That publishers' deadlines are also crumbly.
Yeah.
And if they don't actually demand the money back.
Right.
They say, okay, fine. It's unfortunate. How late are you going to be? Right. And then they make adjustments, and it's hell for them.
Right.
Yeah,
right,
it really
right.
is.
It's a
but they do. They are used
sort
to
of
it.
thing, yeah.
It works. You work through it. In point of fact, I should like to point out that I took 2 years to write Paradise. They took 2 years after that to publish it. Mm-hmm. It was one of those horrible things. It was supposed to be my breakout book, but it was commissioned as a crime novel. So I wrote it as a crime novel, and then by the time I'd finished, because I'd taken 2 years over it, the guy who'd commissioned it had left the company. The person who took it, who accepted it, was his boss, who said, I don't want to publish this as a crime novel. I want to publish this as mainstream fiction, which means we have to tear up all his plans and start again.
How hard was that to go back and change it if you'd already written it?
Well, no, I didn't have to change the text.
Okay.
It was just the way they were going to publish it.
Marketing.
Yes.
Did I say this was lemon flavored? Citrus scent with a strong watermelon flavor.
Exactly. But that meant sort of, publication was going to be delayed. Mm-hmm. And then during that delay, the company was sold. And it was a condition of the sale that the big boss who had been publishing me, or who had taken me over, leave the company.
Oh dear.
Yes. She wasn't terribly tactful, I believe. And so I found myself with another editor, and her bosses looked at this book and said, mainstream fiction? Nonsense. We'll sell more copies if we publish it as horror. I have to say, this book is not horror.
I think we could have a whole long talk about the different labels. Because you can go into Amazon right now and say, young adult, really, that's it. It just happens to murder a lot of people.
I say pigeonhole.
Yes.
I'm just saying, so that's a little bit more fluid now, and I suppose, if you're doing the self-publishing.
Did we actually talk about deadlines today?
Absolutely.
I think we've mentioned them several times.
Okay, good.
We can bring them up again if you want to.
Might be a good idea. I don't know.
So, how do you handle your deadlines?
Drinking.
Technical writing deadlines aren't. I mean, there isn't really such a thing as writer's block in technical writing. You know exactly what you're going to write. It's just a matter of kind of forcing it all together and getting the subject matter experts to spend the time to tell you what they're doing.
I find that all you really need is a great plan and not enough time.
And then it happens.
Yeah, then things get done.
I do have a deadline story for technical writing, but it will have to wait to another time because it's a bit elaborate. So.
You mean it would overflow our deadline?
I think I mean that, yes.
Well, this and more deadlines will be brought to you soon.
Because we've hardly touched on them.
The thing is, I think one of the things, the easiest way, if it works, to do a deadline is to say, okay, I need to have roughly this much, 500 words a day or whatever, roughly this much, and a regular time to do it, and, ride on the train on the way home from work, do something like that. Set it up that way. I read Joe Haldeman's blog, or used to a long time ago, and he would get up at 5 a.m. and write 300 words every day and meet his deadline.
Yeah, but that's the same rat bastard people that get up and do weights and run in the morning.
That works for Joe Haldeman. That might work for you. That doesn't work for Chaz. For creative stuff, it doesn't work for me either. Right. And Jeannie's giving us...
I'm giving you the highlight signal saying that we are going to put links to all of these exciting... From all of Chaz's books to Joe Haldeman's blog and more on the topic of our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. We live for email.
Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter. You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web support magic is brought to you by Deirdre McGaffey-Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spider is David Welsh. Our intro music is Pretty Maid Milking a Cow, and our exit music is Breakfast with a Morning Person, both by Michael Engberg. You can hear Michael Engberg more on minihutsmusic.com. Today's podcast sponsor was Chateau Big Top 2013 Red Table Wine, death-defying blends of stupendous proportions. Also my friend Lucy's family, so,
It's very nice.
Isn't that nice?
I do like it.
We appreciate it, Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy.
Yes, thank you.